Hello and welcome to episode number 310 of the Armin Show podcast, where it has been growing. We learn more, we understand more about science, creativity. I include a little bit about boldness, reaching out, changing your life a bit as possible, because we have opportunities in this existence. On this episode here, we have the author of multiple books. Okay, you see books on books, okay? We'll get to those. This author was born in the same city on the planet as I was, which is Tehran in Iran. Fabulous item there, and departed from there in the same way that I did at some point. And that is the story that is in her book, A Beginner's Guide to America for the Immigrant and the Curious. Roya Hakakian, welcome to the show.
Hi, Armin. I'm delighted.
We're glad to have you on here, full of delight, colorful, and vibrant. Now, you have written multiple books, you have done poetry, you're creative. Before we get to the content, how would you describe your path getting to where you are right now?
It's been bumpy and it continues to be bumpy. What I find every time is that I publish a book and it's great, and then I want to go to a publisher for a second book, and it's as if I've never published anything.
Who are you?
So it's always, it's amazing. It's always starting, I suppose, from the very beginning. I shouldn't say that because, I know how difficult it is for so many writers to land a book contract and actually do get published by real press. So I can't complain because I've had amazing publishers, especially my last one, the book which you showed, which is a Knopf book. So there's nothing to complain about except that there's a certain amount of productivity and activity that you need to keep up, and if you don't, then you need to kind of build your way back up, which is what has happened. Some of the distances between my first book and the second book and the second book and the third book have been a bit longer than what they should have been.
Momentum. I have talked about momentum many a times. We who are creators or do things, we don't want to let the momentum slip because we're putting ourselves in a space where things are made, things are going out, we're glad to be there. If that slips, we're basically in somebody else's home at that point where we're not making, we're not doing, we're not putting out. And then we'll have these gaps like you're describing that don't make sense to us later. Like, why was that gap there? There was opportunity. Momentum is a big deal. So staying prolific is nice, and you have stayed prolific of sorts. Publishers and behind the scenes stuff, nobody sees that kind of thing, but it's the process. Nobody sees any of the behind the scenes. That's why there's so few people that make great things or do a lot, because if all those things were so light natured, everybody would just casually, I have a book, I have a thing, that's not how it works. Now, let's go into this book here and your background as far as getting to the United States. Can you tell us about your departure from there to here? And then later on, maybe I'll include some of mine as well.
Sure. I'd love to hear your story. This book that you are referring to isn't so much a memoir. So it's a mix. It's a salad, I call it. I decided that it can be anything I want. So it was a little bit of memoir and a little bit of fictionalized accounts here and there, which I can point to. There are dialogues that I make up, and those are the parts that I'm calling fictionalized. And then there are actually eyewitness accounts and testimonies and memoirs of other immigrants and refugees that I have incorporated. So it's a salad of sorts. However, my first book, which you don't have at your disposal,
you're right. I do not have Journey from the Land of No. I do not.
No, is actually the story of the Iranian Revolution in 1979 and how I, as a little girl, kind of was coming of age during those tumultuous years. What I saw, because I thought, why should just the politicians and the important people get to say what they saw? I was a kid. or I was a preteen and then a teen when it all went down. And you know, I'd like to share my
You
perspective
have a
too.
voice.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the first book, and the story of what happened to Iran. Both are, you know, birth countries, and then how it affected me as a girl, women at large, and then the Jewish community and secular Iranians. And those were really the three groups that I was most interested in telling the story of. And that was because, you know, when I came here, and that maybe your own experience too, you know, we said Iran and everybody immediately thought, you know, devout Shiite person, you know, with, and there was nothing in between. There was not Jew, you know, there are no Jews in Iran. Like, there were Jews in Iran before there were Muslims in Iran. And you know, secular Iranians, no, you know, secular Iranians don't exist. So I thought my job was to tell the story of those people whose voices or the record of their existence somehow didn't exist. And that was the memoir. And then it sort of ends, I have heard from many people, at a climactic moment, which is when my father says it's time for us to leave Iran. But then I don't tell the story of the departure, which is what many readers have said, so then what? And I haven't told that segment yet.
That's unbelievable. Okay. You're
So
leaving people like this.
what was your departure story?
Well, I don't recall any of it because it was, let's say, 2 months into my existence. And then we headed over to the land of Germany. And then we were there for about a year and a half or something, a year and 10 months. And then we came here. So I'm 2 when I get here. So as far as the recollection, real limited. I'm about a month, 2 months old, but definitely great culture there. I like the architecture. I'm kidding. I don't remember anything, but it was a definite process there. It was not like a casual, you know, relocation to a new land for
Sure.
my familial entities. And there's a lot of heft to it at that time. Now it looks more like a story, but I'm sure at that time it was more like a risky endeavor of sorts.
Yeah. Mhm.
Would you describe your departure as a risky endeavor or more of
Oh,
a casual relocation?
Risks, maybe it was risky for my dad more than it was risky for my mother and me, who left Iran together. My father was smuggled into Pakistan on the back of a, you know, donkey truck or handcart or whatever. So his was, you know, far more adventurous and dangerous. Ours wasn't so much, but then, you know, it was certainly eventful and tragic and dramatic. And you know, you don't remember, but the period that you were in Germany, I was in Austria next door, and that I was there with my mom and a group of other women who were applying to become refugees in the United States. And so, you know, we were all, you know, 12 people cooped up in a 2-bedroom apartment, and for about a year, which is the time it took for our asylum applications to the United States to be approved. So yeah, tumultuous times.
I like that you bring up, well, earlier you brought up how there can be this kind of person from Iran or other types of people. There's no nuance. And I feel like we fill in the gaps for what's missing. So there's no nuance. You bring all the nuance. There's no people telling the story at that time because it's tumultuous. You're telling the story about that time because it's not as tumultuous, and now it's time to express. Do you ever feel like we as people fill in the gaps that other moments did not allow for?
Exactly. I mean, I have always, from the very beginning, that I started to write in English, not in Persian, because in Persian I was writing poetry and it was a whole different, you know, endeavor. But as soon as I started to write in English, I saw myself as the person whose responsibility in some ways, or commitment, or I drew inspiration from finding the stories that could vanish if I didn't tell them. So I thought my job wasn't to talk about, the nuclear negotiations, because everybody else in the world was talking about the nuclear negotiations.
Right.
I thought my job wasn't to explain, what is the difference between this cleric and that cleric in Iran, because everybody else is talking about that. And I thought I should, not that I should, but I was drawn to the stories that I thought could disappear or be wiped away from the record if I didn't bear witness to them. And that's what I've done from the beginning till now.
I like that you were drawn to them. It
Yeah.
was your interest. It was connected with your passion versus like, you should do this. This is what people do. It's a different dynamic. Now, in the book, your perspective, I noticed, is not of like, I did this and then I did that. There's a perspective that you noticed what was happening. Why did you choose that perspective versus like, I went to here and then I caused this to occur and then I did this, and the United States was there was a perspective there.
I tell the whole book, or I tell the voice of that book was all in second person. So I'm addressing the reader as if I'm instructing them. It was a definitely an artistic choice, because I thought, and this is where it all began, the idea of this book. In 2016, when we were hearing all this, anti-immigrant rhetoric, and immigrants are here to take our jobs, and immigrants are, come here to, rape and do this, or, commit crimes and stuff. I really was startled, and I thought, what? Even though in some ways it was so long ago that I had been a new immigrant, it should have been really none of my business, because I've been a naturalized citizen for a long time. I could have easily said, this isn't my issue. But then I couldn't also help think that if I don't defend, my brethren, if I don't defend the immigrant, or if I, rather than defend, let's say, if I don't explain the immigrant and what the immigrant feels like upon arriving in America, who will? Because, because everybody was talking on behalf of the immigrant, right? There were politicians, pro and con, pro-immigrant and anti-immigrant on both sides, who were speaking on behalf of the immigrant. Then there were a whole bunch of journalists who rightly were reporting on the immigrant. And I thought, wait, the immigrant should say something too. And so I thought, here I am a naturalized citizen, so I can both speak on behalf of the immigrant and to the new immigrant. And in the process, hopefully, in pretending to have this conversation with the newcomer, maybe some of the native-born Americans whom I want to reach will eavesdrop, so to speak, on this conversation, and then take something away, right? Hear something that they may not hear elsewhere. And that's really, in some ways, the sort of feedback that I keep getting, that people who've been born and raised in this country have, post on Amazon and on review boards, that they are seeing America as if for the first time by reading this book. And that's precisely what I wanted to happen. I wanted people to see what we see. I wanted people to experience what we experience. And I thought that would have a disarming influence, that people who knew how we react upon arriving here would somehow get very close to us, and therefore be less afraid of us, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Does it come from a place of empathy or more like being informational?
I think it comes from a place of empathy. It comes from a place of sympathy, and I think in the process of imparting both of those emotions, then it's also informational. It has to be, because you once you know impart that sense to somebody, it's not just a feeling. It comes with a series of um, knowledge that you didn't have before. So it naturally becomes informational too.
Yeah, this one's a classic. I know countries like Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan, but where is Selfesteem and what's that about? That was inside the novel of sorts. Where can I find Selfesteem?
Self-esteem was what I thought in some ways America can be described as, right? I remember, well, you were, wee bit when you were in Iran, so you don't know this, but the first time I published a book of poetry, tiny, tiny little book, and it was all obviously in Persian, a critic who I really, really liked and whose views I so very much admired, um, called me up to congratulate me, to say that she really liked the book. And I was
That's the best
ecstatic.
feeling.
I was just so happy. And I was really, really young. I was in my early 20s. So to think that I had, published a little book, and the very critic who I really admired had picked up the phone to call me to tell me that she liked the book, it was a big deal. But she said something amazing.
What did she
She
say?
said, she said, it's a beautiful book. You're great. You will have a great future, blah, blah, blah. Everything that I wanted to hear. But there are too many eyes in your book. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, we are Iranians, we can't sound so selfish and so self-centered. So you should work on, eliminating all these eyes and take the emphasis off of yourself. Now, I'm thinking, I don't know what to think of this, because what kind of advice is that?
Take out all the eyes, just take them out.
And then secondly, I was thinking, but I'm a poet. That's what we do. We put ourselves in the way of experiences to try to tell the rest of the world what it feels like. And how could I possibly wipe that away? And then imagine that's where we come from, right? That's the culture that we come from. And then you arrive here in America, where as I say in the book, is king. We are told that we have rights. We are told that we're important. We're told that, our opinions matter, and that we should express them. And so that it wasn't so much a clash of races or I don't know, religions, as it was a clash of two vastly different views of who I am vis-a-vis everybody else, and whether I matter or can express myself or not. And therefore I thought I had gone from the land of no, which is how I refer to Iran in my first book. It's called Journey from the Land of No, the country that denied me and the other girls everything, to Selfesteem, the country that said the self is everything. So I thought, it was in some ways the proper way of referring to this country and to my experience as someone who had come from a place like that.
This is a big one. I think of it like collectivist versus individualist nations. Europe is also kind of collectivist. Would you say that however someone grew up until, let's say, age 15 to 20 is a big factor in which view they'll be more fitting with, probably for their whole existence?
I don't. I do think that, certain experiences shape us early on in irreversible ways. But I also don't want to ever believe that we can change the way we think about the world, after the age of, 15 or 16. I'd like to believe that it's always possible to add to who we are and what we think and how we are. But at the same time, yes, there are ways in which I sometimes describe how it is that I write as a process of going back to the age of 14 and then looking at the world once again, through that perspective, mainly not because I want to lose the knowledge that I have now, but because there was something about that time. There was something about being 14 and 15 and being able to kind of do away with so much of other layers of consciousness or anxiety that get in the way, that didn't exist for me back then. And I saw what I saw. I knew what I was seeing, and I felt very strongly about everything. And of course, adolescents do, but there was something pure and urgent about all of that, which I always try to find my way back to as a writer.
Cool quality. Kids see things and they're like, that's a that, this is that. Somebody looks at them a certain way, they're like, I don't like that person. 12 years later, they're like, that's why I didn't like them. And they find out. But you can tell from these little items, but then later on in life, those same things you're not as cognizant of. You're like, I have to worry about this thing instead. And then you're not as, the bandwidth is dropped in most ways. I like high bandwidth interactions in life. I always think about video is highest bandwidth, then audio is lower than text. And like the lowest bandwidth, one book said, is a like on social media because it's just a 1-bit click like, and it doesn't really say much. That's funny. Yeah, that's the experience of it. Would you say that you resonate now more with the way of this region, or it is something that you're compelled towards like we as a group and thinking for like a group of people to this day?
There is definitely a mix of both world perspectives that have intertwined within me, and I can't really separate. I can't say this is what I was 30 years ago, or this is the Iranian aspect of me and this is the American aspect of me. I think they're both really intertwined in and in certain ways it's a very very wonderful thing, because a lot of times I feel like I'm an interlocutor, because I can.
One of the best words out there.
Yes. So I do you feel that way?
Can you tell our listeners what an interlocutor is?
An intermediary, someone who interprets one side for the other. I go from, sometimes I feel like, I'm standing on a bridge between these two peoples or cultures. And my job is to tell, this side what the others are saying and bring the news back. And I oftentimes feel like that's what I do in writing. I'm taking messages back and forth through my own observations. I'm trying to explain both sides to the other in ways that it may be inaccessible to them because they have heard about the other side through people who were firmly standing on just one side. And I feel that I belong truly to both, and I'm rooted truly in both, and therefore, I have a better access to either side.
I noticed that poetry has a warmth to it, connectivity, and it's relatable. Same with stories with people and actors in them that are characters, as opposed to if it was just in like an encyclopedia or almanac that's informative, but it's not relatable. Why the poetry in the first place? How did you jump to that? You didn't have to be creative. Where did that come
I always try to say to people who ask me that question, why did you start writing poetry? That, for the same reason that every American kid signs up for, Little League and baseball training, right? This is what we did in Iran. It was our equivalent of Little League. We all wrote poetry. And we were supposed to. We were supposed to, kind of react to the world, either by borrowing from older poets, other poets, or by creating. And so, or at least that's how I understood us to be at the time that I was in Iran. And certainly the fact that my father was always in a corner when he was at home. He was always in a corner with a notebook. And he didn't even have a desk. He didn't even sat on a desk. He was kind of crouching on the floor where we all, sat. And he would hold the notebook against his knees and he would scribble things. And, it was always poetry. So we went to weddings and my father would be invited to recite whatever it was he had composed about the bride and groom, whom oftentimes he didn't know from Adam, but he would compose something about them anyway, or other occasions like this. But that's how I kind of experienced myself as his daughter and as sort of belonging to that tradition.
I like that example because that doesn't seem so difficult to do versus a person who's like, I need the perfect table. I need my exact laptop and it needs to be like this. I need the lighting like this and the music like this before I can create. And then they'll just sit there at a blank page. And then he's over there in the corner, no table, no there's a paper. If you have it, you have it. And then the limitations are not really there. If it's not really in you and you put 15 other things, or you're going to be a runner and you get running shoes and you get 15 things, but you don't actually go and do it, it's not the main thing has to be there. It's a good example.
Mm-hmm.
Limitation is good, by the way. Actually, I want to go to that. How has limitation served you in your existence to focus you in some way? Has it done that?
That's interesting.
Mhm.
I think so. I think, I wanted a piano so badly as a child.
How badly though? Because we just don't know.
What?
How badly though? We just can't tell.
So badly that I used to sit at breakfast with a knife and fork, and I used to imagine that there was a keyboard in front of me, and I was stupid enough.
Not stupid. I'm not agreeing with that.
To think that if only I had the real keyboard, then this is how I had to press, with my fork and knife, the keys in order to, bring out whatever sound it was or tune that I was listening to. So I was certain that I was pressing the right imaginary keys, if only I had the real thing in front of me. And that's what I was doing, at breakfast, at meals, and there was a boy when I was 14 who was not terribly attractive and who certainly wasn't very sociable, but he was a great pianist. And I used to follow him to his piano lessons. So he would go to his piano lesson. I would go into the room and sit in the corner and just listen. So I'm saying all this because I wanted a piano. We couldn't afford one. So I found a boy who could have afforded or had afforded a piano. And I just followed him from one lesson to the next. And so I think, this is a long way of, roundabout way of saying that
We like roundabout here, by the way.
Because I didn't have a piano, because all the other fancy things that weren't accessible to me, especially after the rise of the revolutionary government in Iran, where women couldn't do X, Y, and Z, and there were no theater, and there were you couldn't do so many sports were shut down on, especially on women, and much of it on the rest of the country too. And music was banned in those early years. I just had writing, and I think in some ways, yes, it focused me.
Out of curiosity, did you return to piano in some form, or did you leave that on the side?
No, I just decided it was, by the time I did have a piano in my home, I thought, it's just too late, but why not? I mean, we could all try, right?
Yes, I like pianos. It's actually my favorite instrument of all, and I play a little bit, but that's kind of cool that we have an image. There's things when I was young, I thought I was doing that thing accurately for what it would be in my small version, because I guess our imagination doesn't make it so that we're playing, but it's playing wrong like it would be on an actual thing, or like race cars, we're going full speed and everything is at the idealization level. And then later on, practicality hits, and then we have to progress through it, kind of a transition. That's kind of cool. I noticed themes. I'm very theme-oriented in individuals. But before I say that, what are some words you would use to describe yourself? Let's say 3 words that you identify with, or that you would use to describe yourself. It's always a challenge one. This one, it's not a challenge for me because I've thought about it for years, but when I throw it out there, it's always like a, yeah.
I think I am introspective. I think I am creative, and I think I am curious. That's fortunately a quality that I have not lost. So you can always show me, as my sons now do, introduce me to something new, and I won't say, oh no, rap is not for me, I'm a rock person. But no, they bring things to me, and I do like to enter their world, and I do like to know what it is that intrigues them and excites them. So I'm happy that I remain curious.
You have a warmth we are short of in 2021 in general. Now, I would like to transition also and include Assassins of the Turquoise Palace. Turquoise is one of my favorite colors, cyan, aquamarine. I've told that to people for years for no reason almost. But how is this part of the story? And it also is informational in some forms, but why is this book the second of your series of books?
Well, the first book was the story of the Iranian Revolution and what I saw as a kid in Iran, as a little girl. That book is the story of the diaspora, the Iranian diaspora in Europe. And then the third book brings us to the United States. So, I mean, I didn't conceive them as 3 books that belong together, but eventually, now that they're done, I feel like in some ways they're a trilogy, because we're in Iran, then we're in transit, and then we arrive. So that book tells the story, one particular story about an assassination at a restaurant against a group of Iranian dissidents who were having dinner together. And then, what it took for the German justice system to prosecute these assassins and deliver justice. It was a really wonderful story, and I learned a great deal about so much in the process, about Germany, about how the German justice system is different from our justice system here in the United States, and also about how a mere delivery of justice to a group of disadvantaged people whom in that particular book are Iranian refugees in Europe, can create a path or can pave the way for them to feel belonging in these other countries where they've come to. That I think in some ways that the happy or just ending to that trial caused so many of the refugees within the Iranian community to come to believe in the German justice system, and as a result of it, to feel that they could belong in Germany as real citizens because they saw that it would be fair to them. And so I use that entire story to tell many other many other points, but that certainly is one of them.
As you have written your books, have there been any people who were notable to you, or you were kind of modeling after their writing, or maybe even poets? But are there any figures that you look to for many years for inspiration or some sort of blueprint?
Certainly. I mean, I can't remember who it was at the time that I was writing this one or the other one, but yes, I actually get very close to certain writers while I'm looking for a particular sensibility or voice or mood, and then I read and read and read until I sort of exhaust that writer, and then I move on to someone else. For a while, I was looking at Twitter today, and someone had listed his favorite books of fiction, and I immediately added a few of mine, and one of them was The Testament of Mary, for instance, by Colm Tobin. It's one of my all-time favorite books, which is incidentally, it's the voice of the mother of Jesus, Mary, who is telling her own account of what it was like to lose her son, what she saw. And that was actually one of the inspirations behind this third book about, the immigrant arriving in America, that very strong voice of someone who had experienced something very deeply, who wanted to tell others about it, was echoing in my head, certainly, at least when I decided to write this book, this new one.
One of the greatest things we do in life is have our hefty passion within us and then express it to others. For some, that's their greatest moments of their days. Oh, passion was passed on, and I get the feeling of someone who likes something, because there's so few, let's say, who really are into what they're saying or what they're doing. Those few people, I think, energize basically everybody else and through their time. So it's a very important cause for anyone who has a lot of momentum or prolific natures to pass that on in some form. If you had, this one's a good one because I like to check sometimes, if you had a message to all people of the planet, what would you want them to know about either your writing or just the message you tell to them? And if possible, could you do that in English and Persian for variation purposes?
Wait, what was that last part?
Oh, that message, could you include an element of it in English and then maybe add a Persian translation of it after? That'd be cool.
See if I can. So, ever since COVID hit, we keep hearing that nobody's safe unless we're all safe, right? And I really like that. I really like the thought that, we all have to mask up, or we all have to get vaccinated, because if we don't, then nobody can really be worry-free, right? But what I don't like, or what I would like people to do, is to extend this idea to everything else too. That in some ways, none of us can truly enjoy our own democracy unless everybody else has a democracy too, because their absence of democracy will affect us one way or another. Their absence of freedom will affect us one way or another eventually. So I love this COVID experience in the way that it showed us that we're in it together, all of us. And I just want us to take the next logical step, which is that it applies to everything else about us. We're in this together politically, socially, democratically, and which in Persian, one of our great poets said, "Bani Adam azay yekdigarand ke dar afarinesh yekdigarand," which is to say, people, human beings are all part of each other, and they were all the same at the time of Genesis, and that's how they were born. So in some ways, it tells us that we're interconnected, and that's what I think is wonderful to impart on others.
An interconnectedness of sorts. A couple of things you had mentioned there remind me of a similar view from an ethicist I had talked to. So there's ethics involved in what you're saying too, which is a nice feature of sorts. This is wonderful. In constraints of time, which I value, and it's important to value, and I tell people this, if you value your time highly, other people will value your time highly, and also you'll be around more people who value their time highly and will also value your time highly. It's like a shared thing. So
shall we go?
We shall go, but before we do, I want to mention to all the people, Assassins of the Turquoise Palace, A Beginner Guide to America, Roya Hakakian, poet, Persian, from the same country as me. I would like to thank you for having been on episode 310 of the show.
I loved it. Thank you.
I like it too, and we are out.